Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into the absolutely incredible and maybe even a little underestimated power of the human brain to heal itself and adapt. We're going to look at the work of a neurobiologist named Niels Birbaumer, because his research, well, it pretty much challenges everything we think we know about what recovery really means.
Okay, to get started, I want you to just imagine something with me for a second. Think about that famous South American arrow poison, curare. You've probably heard of it in movies or books. There's a reason it's so notorious. Once it's in your system, it basically turns you into a living statue. Every single muscle just stops working. You can't move, you can't talk, you can't even breathe on your own. But here's the truly terrifying part. Your mind. It's still there. Totally clear, completely conscious. You are trapped inside a body that you can no longer control.
Okay, now hold on to that chilling thought. What if this wasn't some temporary poison? What if that total conscious paralysis came from an illness or an accident? And what if it was permanent?
Well, this terrifying condition actually has a name. It's called locked-in syndrome. And get this, it turns out that pretty much everything we assume about how awful it must be might be totally wrong. So just to be clear, locked-in syndrome is a state where someone's mind is 100% there. They're aware, they can think, they can feel emotions, but their body is, for all intents and purposes, a prison. In a lot of cases, their only way to communicate with the entire outside world is by blinking or maybe a tiny up and down movement of their eyes. Now, when you and I look at a situation like that from the outside, we make a pretty immediate assumption, right? And it seems logical. We see a life of just constant agony. We think about how it must be pure torment, and honestly, a lot of people would say it's a fate worse than death. But this is where the story takes a hard left turn. Because when researchers like Birbaumer are finally able to communicate with these patients, the story they hear is just not what anyone expects. After they've had time to adapt to this new reality, many of them don't just tolerate their situation. No, they actually report having a high quality of life. The researchers even called it an impressive lust for life. Just wow. I mean, that just brings up a massive question, doesn't it? How is that even possible? If we think happiness is all about doing things, interacting with people, moving around, how can someone be happy in a world without any of that? What is going on inside the brain that makes that kind of resilience possible?
Well, the answer, it turns out, lies in one of the absolute coolest ideas in all of neuroscience right now: neuroplasticity. It's this incredible, almost magical ability the brain has to literally remold and rewire itself.
Yeah, so the big thing to get here is that your brain isn't like a computer that's hardwired from the factory. Not at all. It's way more like a piece of living clay that's constantly being reshaped by your experiences, especially when it faces a new challenge. You could say this amazing plasticity is one of our greatest superpowers as a species.
And here's a perfect, almost unbelievable example of this in action. There was a case of a young girl born with only one half of her brain, just the left hemisphere. I mean, you'd expect that to cause all sorts of massive problems, right? But what actually happened? Her brain completely rewired itself. That one single hemisphere managed to reorganize itself to handle the job of vision for both eyes. It's just an absolutely stunning example of what the brain can do.
And this isn't just some freak occurrence, not at all. We see this kind of comeback story all the time. Take stroke recovery. The German actor Peer Augustinski had a stroke that left him almost completely paralyzed on one side. But through intense therapy, his brain literally found new routes, it relearned what it had lost, and he actually got back on stage. It's like the brain is its own project manager, always checking in on things and shifting tasks from damaged areas over to healthy ones to get the job done.
Okay, so this is where it gets really, really exciting. We don't have to just sit back and hope the brain heals on its own anymore. We can actually jump in and become active partners in that healing process, using some amazing technology to tap right into that neuroplasticity.
So how does that work? Well, it's done with something called a brain-machine interface, or BMI. Look at this diagram here. Basically, a patient lies in a scanner and they can see a visual representation of their own brain activity on a screen, right there in real time. And by just focusing their thoughts and watching that screen, they slowly learn, through trial and error, how to control things like blood flow to very specific parts of their brain. It's a direct conversation between their mind and a machine.
You can even turn this whole thing into a kind of video game. For someone with epilepsy, for instance, they might see their brain activity as a space rocket on the screen. When the rocket is green, their brain is calm. But if it starts to turn red, that's a warning. Their neurons are getting overexcited and a seizure could be coming. So their job, the goal of the game, is to use their mind, any mental trick they can come up with, to turn that rocket back to green. And in doing that, they're literally learning to control the brain signals that cause seizures in the first place. And this tech is so much bigger than just epilepsy. It's completely changing the game in rehabilitation. We're seeing stroke patients learn to control these super advanced prosthetic arms and legs just by thinking about it. And because these systems are becoming more portable, the therapy doesn't have to stop at the clinic door. They can take it home with them, which, as you can imagine, just supercharges their recovery.
All right, so let's just zoom out for a second and think about the big picture here. What does all this stuff about locked-in syndrome, neuroplasticity, and these brain hacking technologies, what does it actually mean for us?
Well, the main takeaway is pretty huge. We have to throw out that old fatalistic view of brain injuries. This research shows, without a doubt, that our assumptions about what makes a life worth living are often just flat out wrong. The brain's ability to heal itself is way, way bigger than we ever thought. And maybe most importantly, it shows us that we are not prisoners of whatever state our brain is in right now. Change is always on the table.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe most powerful thought. This isn't just a story about patients with extreme medical conditions. This is a story that challenges every single one of us. Because if a human brain can find a way to not just survive but thrive after something so catastrophic, what does that say about the little limits that you and I put on ourselves every single day? What does it say about our own potential to learn, to adapt, and to change?